This is a little difficult for people to understand if you haven't been following along to the intricacies of this argument. But why don't you explain what you think the problem is?
Yeah, very simply, Becky, thank you for having me on this morning, by the way. Very simply, is this bill, this COVID bill, also going to be known as the Biden tax cut ban bill? Because an 11th hour provision was put in that says basically that you can't use any of these funds directly or indirectly for tax and revenue purposes in the states. That means no tax deductions or credits or anything to do with rates. And if that was allowed to stand, Becky, it'd be the single greatest commandeering of what states are supposed to do. And that's deal with tax and revenue. And so we wrote a letter to the Treasury Department last week or earlier this week, asking them to clarify through a spokesman. They said that they agreed with us. But as you mentioned, Ohio has filed suit, and we need more than a statement to make sure that this isn't going to be a tax cut ban on our states.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those complicated issues where it was probably unforeseen consequences of things that they put in. I understand why they put this in, because part of the way that you qualify for the funds in that $350 billion pot is you have to prove that your state lost revenue, came up with a revenue shortage. That's because this is supposed to be a rescue bill, something like emergency funds for states that got particularly hit hard, for localities that got particularly hit hard, just like you would step in after a hurricane or something. I guess the concern was that states would then turn around and give big tax breaks and then say, oh, we need more of the money because our revenue went down. I get why they did that, but your concern is this would stop any tax plans that had even been in the works long before this bill came along.
That's right. And until 2024, for the next 4 years, we would be prohibited. So, again, I understand that using the funds for the purpose it was intended, completely understand that and don't have a problem with it. But it's so broad and it's so ambiguous. For example, in Georgia right now, our legislature is debating a tax credit for those that are going to adopt from foster care. There's also an increase in the standard deduction for couples, for married couples. Those types of things should not be used. And again, we believe in federalist principles. The federal government's got its role. State government has its role. We have absolute right to be able to control our own tax and revenue policy. And it's crystal clear that the federal government cannot come in and ambiguously tie conditions to funding such that either they want their preferred way of doing it, or you, as I mentioned before, you take over what is essentially a state function. And that's the role of state attorneys general. And you've seen it also with governors and speakers of the House. Our governor and our speaker has written on this as well. But we've got to be a backstop, because this literally could be one of the most egregious examples of federal overreach in American history.
I mean, federal authorities have long tied all kinds of restrictions to taking the funds. You don't have to take the funds if you want to do whatever you want. Is there a way of working this out peacefully, or do you think this is going to be a full-on war?
Well, no, that's why we wrote the letter. But, Becky, yeah, you can create conditions, but they have to be specific. They can't be ambiguous. The courts have said that. And to say you can't use any of the money directly or indirectly, that's where the piece of this that's incredibly troubling. It's indirectly. Well, again, those tax credits that I mentioned, the tax treatment that we're dealing with in Georgia, could be impacted, and those from around the country for the next 4 years. Again, if you have specific conditions to use those funds for the purposes that it's intended, completely understandable.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.